My parents didn't invite me to Thanksgiving. They said, it's just a family dinner, and said that I'm not welcome. Hey there, before I dive into this, I just want to quickly say, if you're enjoying these kinds of personal stories, it really helps the channel if you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and turn on notifications. We get very few views, and barely anyone makes it to the end, so your support means a lot. Alright, thanks, and now, let's get into it. Hello Reddit. I'm Trevor. I'm 33 years old, a high school English teacher, and I've spent most of my adult life fading into the background of my own family. My brother Garrett is 36, and everything my parents ever wanted in a son. He's a corporate consultant, six-figure salary, polished suits, fancy apartment in Chicago, the whole thing. My mom says he's going to lift up the whole family. It's like he's their retirement plan with a good haircut. Then there's Ashley. She's 27, a single mom of two, still lives with my parents, and they treat her like she's some kind of whimsical woodland creature. Ashley could set the kitchen on fire, and my mom would say she was just being creative. If Garrett is their golden boy, Ashley is their glowing fairy princess. And me? I teach Shakespeare to bored teenagers in public school, so to them, I'm just there. I used to think maybe I was imagining it. You know, maybe I was being too sensitive or reading too much into things. But it's hard to ignore when it's right in your face year after year. Like Christmas 2 years ago, Garrett showed up with his girlfriend, now ex, and the entire night was a tribute to their relationship. My mom had printed photos of their trip to Paris and made a scrapbook, which she presented like it was the goddamn Nobel Prize. Ashley got a custom necklace with the initials of her kids engraved, plus a spa day voucher. What did I get? A thermal mug. One thermal mug. No note. No card. Just a mug with #OneTeacher on it, which would have been kind of sweet if I hadn't already received the exact same one from a student 3 years earlier. I'm not kidding. It was the same brand, same color, same stupid font. I started wondering if they just found it lying around the house. My dad tried to cover for it. It's practical. You can use it for coffee at school. As if that made up for the fact that they spent hundreds on everyone else. I laughed it off, told them it was fine. But it wasn't fine. That moment stuck with me. Every family event is like that. I'm invited, but I'm never really there. They asked me about school just long enough to say something like, teachers don't get paid nearly enough, before switching over to Garrett's latest business trip to Dubai or Ashley's latest dating disaster. If I try to chime in, I get interrupted or talked over. One time I was halfway through telling a story about one of my students who won a poetry contest, and my mom cut in to ask Ashley what kind of cake she was thinking about for her daughter's birthday. I let it slide. I always do. But the tipping point, what really made me sit down and start writing this, was this past Easter. My mom hosted, as usual. Garrett brought his new girlfriend, a tall, intimidating lawyer named Caroline who has zero interest in anything that doesn't involve mergers or real estate. Ashley brought her kids, and everyone bent over backward to keep them entertained, including me. I helped hide eggs, I watched the toddlers so Ashley could eat in peace, I even did the dishes. And yet, at the end of the day, when everyone was full and happy and buzzing around the living room, my mom stood up to give this little thank you speech. She talked about how lucky she was to have such wonderful kids. She thanked Garrett for taking time out of his busy schedule, and Ashley for being such a strong, amazing mother. Then she said, and I quote, "And of course, Trevor's here too." That's it. No joke. That was the whole shout-out. I'm not saying I deserve a parade, but damn. I drove an hour and a half, bought gifts for the kids, helped clean up, and watched my sister's baby while she drank mimosas. And I'm just here too. After dinner, I asked my dad if I was imagining things. He shrugged and said, "Well, you're more low-key. You don't make as much of a splash." I said, "So because I don't make everything about me, I don't count?" And he said, "Don't take it so personally." That was it. That was the moment I realized I've been wallpaper in my own family for years. It's not like I've had a bad life. I love teaching, even when it's frustrating. I have a decent apartment, a dog named Wally who likes belly rubs and chasing squirrels. I'm not rich, but I get by. But every time I visit my parents, it feels like I'm stepping into a play where I don't have any lines. I'm not a character. I'm just an extra. And what hurts more than anything is knowing that if I disappeared, I'm not sure how long it would take them to notice. I remember once trying to explain to my mom what I actually do. Not just the classroom stuff, but the tutoring I handle most evenings, the hours I pour into designing digital modules for an edtech startup, the consultation gigs I take on for extra income. She was stirring pasta sauce while I talked, nodding in that vacant way people do when they're waiting for their turn to speak. I told her I had just wrapped a curriculum overhaul for a statewide learning initiative, a project that took 3 months and involved weekly meetings with academic boards and tech developers, and all she said was, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Garrett's company flew him to Barcelona last month? That's what it always comes back to. Garrett. The man could sneeze, and they'd ask if it came with a stock bonus. They've got this vision of success burned into their minds like a family crest, and Garrett fits the mold. Suits, contracts, international travel. Me? I'm still just a teacher. They don't see the hours I put in because they don't want to. They think I clock out at 3 p.m. and spend the rest of the day reading novels in a hammock. They have no idea I spend more time lesson planning and grading essays than Garrett probably spends on PowerPoint decks for his quarterly reviews. I stay up till midnight responding to struggling students who ask for help understanding Toni Morrison or Shakespeare. I make tailored reading lists for kids with dyslexia. I create digital flashcards, record mini lectures, troubleshoot a dozen learning platforms. But to my parents, that's not work. It's not prestigious. It's not real. They heard Garrett signed a contract for $200,000 this year, and that was all the proof they needed that he was the successful one. My dad said, with his mouth half full of steak. Now that's a man who knows how to make something of himself. I was sitting across the table at the time, having just finished a week where I pulled 72 hours across my main job and 2 side gigs. Not that it mattered. Last Thanksgiving, my sister Ashley, who barely remembers to feed her own kids on time, made a crack at dinner. She asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So Trevor, do you still, teach poems and stuff?" Then she burst into laughter like she'd just dropped a killer joke. My mom chuckled. Garrett smirked. My dad said something about how the classics are important for people who don't have corporate minds. I felt my face go hot, but I just swallowed my frustration with the cheap wine they'd made me bring. The truth is, I've stopped trying to correct them. I used to send my mom links to my published curriculum guides or newsletters from the education platform I work with, thinking maybe she'd forward it to her friends or at least acknowledge it. She never replied. I sent her a video clip of me speaking at an education conference once. Keynote speaker, live streamed to thousands of viewers. When I brought it up weeks later, she said she didn't have time for YouTube videos, but then spent an hour showing me Garrett's new condo in San Diego via her Facebook album. I know what I do matters. My students tell me. Some of them are the only reason I haven't burned out completely. I've had kids come to me crying because their parents are getting divorced or because they're failing math and feel stupid. I've written letters of recommendation for kids who got into schools their families never thought they'd see. One of my former students is now a published author. Another's studying law. They tell me I helped them believe in themselves, that I mattered, but not to my family. To them, I'm still the backup option. The one they didn't expect much from, but are glad isn't living in their basement. At family gatherings, Garrett talks about disruption and synergies, and everyone listens like he's giving a TED Talk. I mention student literacy rates and standardized testing data, and someone asks if I brought pie. I'm always the one setting the table, driving Ashley's kids home, helping clean up. I'm their permanent understudy in a play I didn't audition for. Even when I try to take a day for myself, I feel guilty. Like I'm wasting time if I'm not working. Because if I slow down, the little bit of self-worth I've carved out starts to erode. I don't get vacations or applause or bonuses. I get a paycheck that barely covers rent, side gigs that eat up my weekends, and a family that thinks I peaked in 10th grade when I won the spelling bee. There are moments, quiet ones, usually around midnight, when I sit on the edge of my bed, laptop still open, lesson plan half written, and I wonder what it would feel like to be seen. To have my parents actually ask me what I do, not out of politeness or obligation, but because they're genuinely proud. I wonder what it would be like if my dad ever told someone, "Trevor's doing amazing work. He's shaping lives." Instead, he tells people, "My son Garrett's in finance, and my daughter Ashley is raising a beautiful family. Oh, and Trevor teaches English, I think." And that's what I am to them. A footnote. An afterthought. Just a teacher. The first time I brought Laura to a family dinner, I knew it wasn't going to go smoothly, but I still didn't expect the quiet judgment to be so thick you could spread it on toast. She wore a red blouse, the kind that made her feel confident, laughed a little too loud for my mother's taste, and told my dad point blank that his joke about lazy teachers wasn't funny. I could practically feel the temperature in the room drop. My mother glanced at me like I'd just brought home someone with muddy shoes and put them on her white sofa. Laura didn't flinch. She smiled, poured herself a glass of wine, and asked Ashley how her kids were doing. That was the start of it. My parents like things a certain way. Polished, quiet, rehearsed. They want smiles that don't show too much teeth and opinions that can be swallowed without chewing. Garrett's girlfriend could read from a teleprompter, and they'd call her the perfect woman. Laura? She doesn't edit herself for anyone. She calls out bullshit when she sees it. She laughs with her whole body, and she doesn't care about impressing people who treat her like a box that didn't come from the right store. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. My mom told me, behind closed doors that Laura was a bit much and not exactly what we pictured for you. She said it like she was picking wallpaper and I had brought home a mural. My dad said Laura was very opinionated and asked if it ever exhausted me, like being married to someone with thoughts was some kind of burden. I kept my mouth shut at first, hoping it would blow over, but it didn't. What really got under my skin was the double standard. Because while my parents criticized Laura for being too loud and not refined, they didn't think twice about calling her every other weekend to help out with the kids when Ashley had plans or needed a break. Laura, the same woman who apparently wasn't good enough for polite conversation, was somehow perfectly acceptable when they needed a free babysitter. They'd drop off the kids at our apartment without even a thank you, acting like it was expected. Like Laura owed them her time because she married me. And Laura, God bless her, tried. She really did. She played with Ashley's kids for hours, made them snacks, helped with homework. She even took them to a park one day so Ashley could relax after a tough week. But it never changed a thing. The next time we saw my parents, my mom still greeted her with a thin smile and asked if she ever considered toning down the colors in her wardrobe. My dad still made those little comments, like, some women are just naturally more subtle, with a pointed glance her way. One night after we got back from another one of those stiff, exhausting dinners, Laura sat down on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and said, I think your mom would rather I just stand in the corner and nod. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't wrong. I could see how hard she was trying to be respectful without becoming invisible, and how draining that tightrope walk was getting. The thing is, Laura's a damn good person. She works as a speech therapist and has helped dozens of kids find their voice, literally. She's the kind of person who remembers the names of people's pets and texts my sister when one of the kids has a dentist appointment just to wish them luck. But none of that counts to my family because she doesn't fit into their fantasy of what a daughter-in-law should be. They want quiet and compliant. Laura is neither. What's worse is that they act like she's the one who's cold. My mom said once, she just doesn't open up to us, as if they've given her any reason to. Laura's not a doormat. She's not going to pretend to love people who treat her like she's defective. And after a while, I stopped trying to explain that to my parents. If they can't see how lucky I am to have someone like her, that's on them. But it still burns. Every time my mom asks why we don't come over more often, I want to tell her the truth, that Laura would rather spend a Saturday doing literally anything else than sit through 3 hours of passive-aggressive jabs disguised as conversation. That I'm tired of watching the woman I love get picked apart because she doesn't smile like a porcelain doll. They don't ask me anymore how things are going in our marriage. They assume everything's fine because we show up for birthdays and say thank you after dinner. But they don't see the little cracks they cause. The way Laura pulls back in the car afterward, her fingers tense on the steering wheel. The way she tries to laugh it off, but goes quiet for the rest of the night. They don't see it because they don't want to. They want Laura to be someone else. Someone quieter, less direct, more palatable. But she's not. And thank God for that. We were sitting at the table, all 6 of us, the usual spread in front of us. Ashley's kids throwing bits of bread at each other, my dad swirling his wine like he knew what he was doing, Garrett leaning back in his chair like a senator waiting for applause. I'd waited patiently through most of the evening. I'd listened to Garrett talk about some merger he was advising on, and Ashley go on about how hard it is to get both kids dressed when they just won't cooperate. I smiled, nodded, added polite little comments where needed. Then, finally, there was a lull. One of those rare moments when no one was talking over anyone else, and I saw an opening. So I said, I had a big win at school this week. One of my students, he's been struggling with dyslexia for years, could barely get through a sentence without freezing up. We've been working together since September, and this week, he read a full paragraph out loud, fluently. No stumbles. The whole class clapped for him. I barely finished that last sentence before my mom cut in, her voice just a little too loud. That's nice, but did you see the article Garrett wrote in Forbes? And before I could respond, before the words had even settled in the air, she was already leaning across the table, shoving her phone into my face like it was a family heirloom. I didn't even have time to process what she'd said. Just like that, my moment was over. Everyone turned toward her phone. My dad made a noise of approval. Ashley glanced up briefly before turning back to her youngest, who was smearing mashed potatoes on his sleeve. Garrett looked modest in the way only people who expect admiration can. And me? I just sat there, staring at the screen she was waving like a flag. It was some corporate jargon-filled piece about leadership and digital transformation, the kind of article no one actually finishes reading, but everyone praises because it sounds impressive. I didn't even get to finish my story. No one asked what the student's name was. No one wanted to know how we worked on phonics, or how I spent extra time every day after class helping him sound out vowel blends. No one thought it was remarkable that a kid who once broke down in tears over a simple sentence had now read aloud with confidence in front of 20 peers. Because it wasn't Garrett. And if it's not Garrett, it doesn't matter. That's the rule in my family. Garrett is the standard. Garrett gets the spotlight. The rest of us are just background noise. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. When Garrett got into business school, there was a backyard party with catered food and balloons that said future CEO. When I graduated with my master's in education, they asked if I was going to try for something more practical next. When Garrett bought his Tesla, they posted about it on Facebook like he'd solved climate change. When I bought my used Toyota Corolla, no one said a word. And it's not even that I want them to worship me. I just want them to listen, to care for 30 seconds, to act like what I do might matter, even just a little. But that dinner was one of those moments where it all crystallized, where it stopped being subtle and became impossible to ignore. I looked around the table and realized I could have said anything at all, and it would have been a footnote in the book of Garrett. I could have announced I won Teacher of the Year. I could have said I got a poem published. I could have said I saved a kid's life. And my mom still would have leaned across the table, shoving her phone at me, saying, "That's nice, but have you seen what Garrett did?" So I put my fork down. I smiled. I nodded. I said, "That's great, Mom." Because what else was I supposed to do? Then I looked at Garrett, who was sipping his wine like he hadn't just sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I wondered, not for the first time, if he even notices. If he ever looks around and realizes how hard the rest of us are trying to keep up, just to be acknowledged. Or if he's too far up on that pedestal they built for him to even see us anymore. It was the third Friday of the month, which for most people doesn't mean anything, but for my family, it's always meant one thing: dinner. Monthly family dinners. That tradition's been etched into our calendar for years. My mom calls it our sacred little ritual, and she loves to remind us that, no matter what's going on in the world, we sit down and eat together. Except this time, the text came at 10:07 in the morning, simple and clinical. "Son, dinner is canceled. We are tired, our finances are failing." I read it 3 times. I didn't even know how to react at first. I sat on the edge of my bed, just holding the phone, blinking at the screen like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. Dinner. Canceled. No follow-up. No, let's reschedule. Or maybe next week. Just canceled. And I knew, deep down, that if Garrett had been planning to show up with one of his fancy wine pairings or some slideshow of his latest real estate conquest, that table would have been set, candles lit, roast in the oven. But I wasn't planning to bring wine. I was planning to bring a car. For the past 3 years, I'd been working my ass off, my full-time job teaching during the day, then tutoring at night, weekend shifts doing freelance curriculum consulting, summer programs, and a stint running writing workshops online. 5 jobs. I tracked every penny, canceled vacations, skipped nights out, patched my sneakers until they were more duct tape than shoe. I'd been saving every cent I could manage for something big, something meaningful, something for them. My parents had been driving this old, wheezing sedan for the last decade. No AC, radio busted, always some new light flashing on the dash. My dad once duct taped the side mirror back on after it got clipped in a parking lot. I still remember him muttering, "We'll replace it someday," as he tried to line it up just right with a roll of electrical tape. That someday never came. So I decided I'd make it come. Quietly, slowly, obsessively, I built up the funds. I picked out the SUV, nothing flashy, but reliable, spacious, a model I knew they liked. I test drove it. I put the down payment on it. I signed the papers. I arranged for it to be ready that Friday. It was supposed to be a moment. A surprise. I had imagined it so clearly. I'd wait until everyone had finished eating, say I had one more thing, then hand over the keys. I pictured my dad getting emotional, my mom covering her mouth in that way she does when she's overwhelmed. I pictured Ashley smiling, even Garrett maybe nodding in approval for once. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say in my head 100 times. But then came the text. I stared at it for a long while. My hands felt numb. All those hours, all the exhaustion, all the times I told myself, "It'll be worth it when you hand them those keys." All of it felt like it had collapsed into nothing in the span of one sentence. But I wasn't going to let it end like that. I decided to stop by anyway. Just me. No dinner. No grand unveiling. Just the keys in my pocket and whatever was left of my hope. I drove over late that evening. The sun had just gone down. Their house looked exactly the same. The porch light on, the curtains drawn. I parked at the end of the driveway, right behind the SUV I had brought. Their SUV. I hadn't put the plates on yet. I was still carrying the paperwork in my bag, along with the little envelope I had stuffed the key fob into. I'd even written a short note. "This is for every time you said we'd replace the car someday. Someday is now." I walked up to the house, clutching the envelope, heart thudding like a drum. I rang the bell. My mom answered the door. She looked surprised, but not exactly happy. More like someone caught in the middle of cleaning and annoyed at the interruption. "Trevor? What are you doing here?" she asked, adjusting her sweater like I was the mailman and she wasn't expecting company. "I know dinner's canceled," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "But I wanted to drop something off." "We're kind of in the middle of something," she said quickly, and behind her, I saw the flicker of the TV, voices and laughter. I recognized Garrett's laugh. Ashley was there too. The whole family. Everyone but me. I just stood there, stunned. "I thought you said dinner was canceled," I said. She hesitated. "Well, we didn't want to make it formal. You've been so busy lately. And it's been tight, financially. You understand." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just handed her the envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Just open it," I said. Then I turned and walked away before she could say anything else. I got in my car, started the engine, and pulled away. I didn't look back. They didn't call that night. Or the next day. A week later, I got a group text from my mom. No mention of the SUV. Just a photo of Garrett holding a wine glass with the caption, "Family Toast." And me? Not even tagged. We pulled up to the house a little after 6, me in the driver's seat, Laura next to me, fiddling with the sleeves of her cardigan the way she does when she's nervous but trying not to show it. The driveway was full, which I thought was strange at first. Then I saw Garrett's car parked dead center like it owned the place, and behind it, Ashley's SUV, our cousin Jordan's old pickup, and even my aunt's white Lexus, which only comes out of her garage on holidays and weddings. Laura looked at me, eyebrows raised. "I thought dinner was canceled," she said. I didn't answer right away. My hand was still on the gear shift, frozen, like maybe if I didn't move, the image in front of us would change. But it didn't. The house was lit up like it always is on family nights. Through the front window, I could see the dining room table, set, decorated, full. Plates stacked with food. People laughing. My dad sitting at the head of the table. Ashley feeding one of her kids from her lap. And Garrett, of course, raising a glass mid-toast like he's hosting a damn TED Talk. My mouth felt dry. I pulled the keys out of the ignition and muttered, "Let's just see what's going on." Laura didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I could feel the tension in her shoulders, the question she didn't want to ask out loud. We walked up to the porch. I rang the doorbell. When the door opened, it was like a vacuum sucked all the warmth from the house into the space between us. My mom stood there, blocking the doorway like I was selling something. Her eyes went wide for a second, then narrowed into something colder. Like I had just walked into a room I wasn't supposed to see. "Trevor," she said, her voice sharp but quiet, like she didn't want to be overheard. "What are you doing here?" I blinked. "You said dinner was canceled." She didn't respond right away. Just looked past me to Laura, then back to me. "It's just a small gathering. Nothing official. We didn't want to overwhelm anyone." I looked past her into the house. There were at least 15 people in there. Relatives we hadn't seen in months. I saw Garrett clinking his glass with someone across the table. Ashley noticed us through the window and turned away so fast it looked like whiplash. "You told me dinner was canceled," I repeated, a little louder this time. Laura shifted beside me. "We didn't think it would be your thing," my mom said quickly, like it was supposed to make sense. "Everyone's been so busy, and with everything going on." "With everything going on?" I cut her off. "What does that even mean?" Her jaw tightened. "You didn't need to come tonight." I didn't know what to say. I didn't trust myself to say anything that wouldn't end in shouting. I could feel Laura's hand brush against mine, lightly, grounding me. "We'll go," Laura said, her voice steady but clipped. My mom didn't argue. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't invite us in. She just nodded once and started closing the door before we had even stepped off the porch. We walked back to the car in silence. It wasn't just the lie. It wasn't just the fact that they had all gathered without us. It was that they hadn't even bothered to make up a good excuse. They didn't care if we knew. They didn't care if I saw the cars, the food, the celebration, the toasts. It was like they decided we weren't part of the family anymore. And this dinner that was canceled, was just their way of making it official. I sat behind the wheel, staring at the windshield for a long time before turning the key. Laura didn't say anything, but I could see her reflection in the glass. She wasn't surprised. And somehow, that hurt even more than the lie. I stood there on the porch, the air between us heavy and cold, my mom holding the door just barely open, like even gravity didn't want me there. The laughter inside floated out behind her, muffled by clinking glasses and the sound of forks tapping plates. I still had the envelope in my hand, the one with the SUV keys, the signed paperwork, the note I wrote in my own shaky handwriting that said, "Thank you for everything. You deserve something good." It suddenly felt like a joke, like I was holding a birthday card at a funeral. I asked, "Why didn't you invite us?" I didn't even try to hide the edge in my voice. She sighed, then gave me this look, one I hadn't seen before, a strange mix of pity and annoyance. "This isn't an ordinary dinner, Trevor," she said slowly, like I was struggling to understand. "It's a celebration. A dinner for people who actually do something for their families." For a second, I thought I misheard. I just stared at her, trying to make the words fit into something that wasn't what it sounded like. But then she added, as if that somehow made it better, "We're celebrating real success. Garrett just landed the biggest client of his career. Ashley's taking on more responsibility with the kids. We thought it would be better this way. You wouldn't have been quiet at the table anyway." I felt something crack behind my ribs. "Really?" I asked. She hesitated, eyes flicking down at the envelope in my hand, then back up to my face. "Well, you're just teaching. Just teaching." 3 words. And somehow they cut deeper than anything she'd ever said to me before. Not because I hadn't heard it before. I had, in different forms, in quieter dismissals, in forgotten birthdays, in ignored texts. But because this time, she said it like it was fact. Like it was obvious. Like the last decade of my life amounted to nothing more than noise. I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking, but I didn't drop the envelope. "I was going to surprise you," I said, my voice low, my throat tight. "The SUV out front, that's yours. I've been saving for it for 3 years. I've worked 5 jobs. Every weekend. Every summer. I haven't taken a vacation since 2019. And I was going to give you the keys tonight. As a thank you. As proof that I do something." Her face didn't change. Maybe her mouth twitched, like she wasn't sure how to react, but it didn't matter. Because in that moment, I realized she wasn't speechless. She was just indifferent. I held out the envelope. She didn't take it. So I slipped it into the doorframe, turned around, and walked down the steps. I didn't look back. I didn't care who saw me. I didn't care if Garrett raised his glass again, or if Ashley rolled her eyes. I walked past the SUV, the one with the ribbon I had tied around the driver's mirror, and got into my car. As I pulled away, the only thing I could think was how quiet it was now. How easy it was, in the end, to leave. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. I didn't even need to look at it to know what it was. I'd barely pulled the covers off when I saw the notification count. 32 messages. All from family. "No, we're sorry. No, we didn't mean for it to go that way." Just more of the same tone they've always used with me. Like I was an unpaid intern at the family firm, and they were all upper management. The first one was from Ashley. "Hey, can you babysit the kids Saturday? I've got a thing." No context. No greeting. Just the expectation, like always, that I'd say yes. The second was from my dad. "We heard you got upset. That wasn't mature. You're not acting like an adult." Then my mom chimed in, naturally. "You know dinners are for those who are worth something, Trevor. You made a scene. Worth something." I stared at that line for a long time. 3 words that told me everything I already knew but had never seen typed out so clearly. Worth something. Not because I worked. Not because I gave. Not because I stayed late, cleaned up, showed up. No, worth something only if they said so. I didn't respond. I just sat there in bed, sunlight creeping in through the blinds, phone still buzzing. And then, without even thinking too hard about it, I opened my contacts and started blocking them. One by one. Mom, Dad, Ashley, Garrett. Every single one. Even the extended family who had shown up that night, smiling and laughing and pretending not to see me standing at the door like I didn't belong. I blocked them all. Then I turned off my phone. Full power down. Not just silent or airplane mode. Off. I stood in the middle of my kitchen for a few minutes afterward, unsure what to do next. My weekends were usually filled with obligations. Grading, tutoring, watching Ashley's kids, helping my dad fix something, showing up for dinners where I was barely acknowledged. But now there was nothing. No noise. No demands. Just space. So I ordered a pizza. Large pepperoni, extra cheese. I hadn't done that in years. Just ordered food without worrying if it fit between lessons or errands or someone else's needs. I threw on an old hoodie, opened a beer from the fridge, and when the pizza came, I sat cross-legged on the couch and ate straight from the box. No plates. No table. No performance. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something strange. Freedom. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, where someone drives off into the sunset. No music swelled. No montage played. It was quieter than that. Calmer. Like a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding finally let go. I wasn't a family errand boy anymore. I wasn't their fallback. Their cleaner. Their on-call support system. I was just a guy on a couch, eating pizza, no one asking for anything. It was quiet. And it was perfect. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk, half asleep, sipping coffee that had gone cold while grading a stack of midterms. I opened my email just to clear out the usual junk, discounts, EdTech newsletters, reminders from the school board, and then I saw it. Subject line. Article in Ed Future Weekly. You're featured. I clicked it without thinking much. I had sent them a press kit months ago and honestly forgot about it. But there it was. A full write-up. They'd written an article about the reading app I'd been quietly developing for the last 3 years. It was surreal. They called it a breakthrough tool for inclusive literacy, highlighted the data from the beta tests I'd run with some of my own students, quoted teachers from 3 different states who had tried it. I read the piece 3 times, just sitting there in my worn-out chair, my heart pounding like I'd run a mile. I barely had time to process it when another email came in. Then another. Then a LinkedIn message from someone with a title that included the word acquisitions. By lunchtime, I was on a Zoom call with a man in a suit whose office had more glass than my entire school. He congratulated me on the app's success, said they'd been watching it quietly for a while, and made their pitch. They wanted to license the full platform. He said the numbers so casually, like it wasn't a life-changing amount of money. $480,000. I blinked. Sorry, did you say 480,000? He smiled. Yes, half up front. The rest upon integration. I didn't even remember how the rest of the call went. I hung up and just sat there, staring at my screen, hands numb. I had made more money in 1 hour than I had teaching, tutoring, and consulting combined over the last 5 years. I walked into the living room, stunned. Laura was folding laundry on the couch, humming to herself. I just stood there for a second, watching her, my mouth half open. What? She said, smiling at me. Why do you look like that? I think we just got $500,000, I said. She froze, mid-fold, socks in her hands. What? They want to license the app. For how much? I told her. She stared at me for a split second, then screamed so loud I thought the neighbors would call the cops. Then she dropped the laundry and ran over, wrapping her arms around me like she thought I might float away if she didn't hold on tight. We both started laughing. Full body, breathless, ridiculous laughter. The kind you can't stop. The kind you only hear after years of being buried in the grind. Because this wasn't just money. It wasn't just a number in an email. It was validation. It was every weekend I stayed up coding when I could have been sleeping. Every lunch break I spent debugging the app instead of eating. Every time I tested the speech-to-text function with a student who couldn't read a full sentence until he used my tool. It was all of that, finally turning into something real. It was freedom, and it was ours. It was a Thursday morning when my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. On the other end was Aunt Jane, her voice low, like she was trying not to be overheard. Trevor, she said, I'm not supposed to be telling you this, but I figured you should know. She didn't waste time. Garrett's out of work. He was fired 2 weeks ago after a really bad client case blew up. Lost the firm a ton of money. He told everyone he was taking time off for a vacation, but it wasn't true. I sat down at the edge of my bed, staring at the floor while she kept talking. She said my parents were in full-blown panic mode, not just because of the embarrassment, though I'm sure that played a role, but because, suddenly, their golden boy wasn't golden anymore. Their retirement plan, their safety net, their pride, was unraveling. Garrett had been telling them for years not to worry, that he'd take care of everything. And now that illusion was cracking like cheap glass. They're scared, Aunt Jane said. They're realizing they may have bet everything on someone who wasn't as bulletproof as they thought. And Trevor, she paused, they're asking about you. That part landed like a punch. I thanked her and hung up. For a while, I just sat there, letting it settle. My whole life, Garrett was the standard. Garrett was the headline. I was the footnote. And now, after everything, after the dinner I wasn't invited to, after they told me I wasn't worth something, after I handed them the keys to a car they didn't even ask for, it turns out their star player had been bluffing his way through the game. And me? I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was an entrepreneur. I was fielding calls from investors. My app had just crossed 10,000 active users. I had teachers from 4 different states emailing me to say it was changing how they taught reading. I had a contract with one of the biggest educational software companies in the country. I was building something real, something that didn't depend on hollow titles or handshakes in glass offices. I wasn't their fallback option anymore. I was the one who had built his own ladder while they were too busy watching Garrett climb a ladder that wasn't even real. Later that afternoon, I got a message from my mom. Just one line. Can we talk sometime soon? I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, not exactly. It was something else. Something quieter. I finally understood that their approval wasn't a currency I needed anymore. Their validation didn't build what I'd made. Their silence hadn't stopped me, and their attention now wasn't going to define me. For the first time in my life, I was no longer trying to catch up to Garrett's shadow. I had outgrown it. It was just past 6 in the morning when the doorbell rang. Laura was still asleep, curled up under the blanket, and I had been sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, enjoying the quiet before the day started. The sound startled me. Nobody visits at that hour unless something's wrong. I got up slowly, walked to the front door, and looked through the peephole. It was my mother. She was standing there in a coat that looked too thin for the morning chill, her hair unbrushed, clutching her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her. I opened the door, not all the way, just enough. "Trevor," she said, voice cracking. "You have to help. We are a family." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. She looked smaller than usual, like the weight of everything had finally started pressing down. There were lines on her face I hadn't noticed before, and her eyes darted over my shoulder, like she was checking to see who else was there. Then I said, quietly but firmly, "A family that kicked me out of my own home because I wasn't successful." Her face changed instantly. She tried to soften, tilting her head slightly, reaching for something resembling humility. "Trevor," she said, "we're proud of your app. Truly. We read the article. It's incredible. But we've had some bad luck. Your father made some bad calls. Garrett's situation, we're in trouble. There's a loan. We've lost almost everything." She looked at me like that should explain everything. Like I was supposed to forget what they said, what they did, just because they had finally hit the ground. Like their sudden pride in my work was enough to erase the years of being ignored. I looked at her for a long moment, hands still on the door. I remembered the night I brought them a car and wasn't let through that same doorway. I remembered standing outside while they laughed with Garrett inside. I remembered the texts, the dinners I was excluded from, the label they'd hung around my neck. Just a teacher. Now they were standing here because Garrett had fallen and I had risen, and suddenly I was useful. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said, "You weren't a family when I needed one." And then I closed the door. Gently. I stood there for a minute, not moving, not breathing. I didn't watch to see if she walked away. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I had nothing to prove. The SUV sat in the dealership lot for 3 days before I made the call. I told them I'd changed my mind, canceled the paperwork, and requested the down payment back. I remember the guy on the phone asking if something was wrong with the vehicle, and I almost laughed. No, the car was fine. It just wasn't the gift I thought it would be anymore. And I wasn't going to spend another cent trying to impress people who had never looked at me with anything but measured indifference. Instead, I took that money, the few $1,000s I'd scraped together over 3 years of late nights and missed weekends, and I did something else with it. Something that made sense in the only world that ever made sense to me, the classroom. I started a scholarship. It's small for now, but it's real. Every year, one student from a low-income background at my school, someone who's never had the chance to even imagine college, gets the opportunity to go. It covers books, supplies, even part of their tuition. It's not everything, but it's enough to tip the balance. Enough to say, "You matter. Someone believes in you." The first recipient was a girl named Kiera. Bright, driven, raised by her grandmother, worked nights at a grocery store, and still managed to keep a 3.8 GPA. When I told her she'd been chosen, she didn't cry. She just nodded and whispered, "I won't waste it." And I knew she meant it. That moment, watching her hold the acceptance letter to a place she never thought she'd reach, was more fulfilling than any thank you I never got from my family. It was more genuine than every forced holiday dinner I'd ever sat through, more honest than any apology that never came. And me? I'm no longer spending my life chasing a seat at a table that was never built for me. I don't check my phone for their texts. I don't scan social media looking for signs they miss me. I don't wonder if I should have said more, done more, given more. I've stopped trying to earn the love of people who only saw me when they needed something. For the first time, I don't feel that dull ache in my chest when I think about them. There's no more bargaining in my head. No more rehearsed explanations. No more hoping for a change that will never come. There's just peace. And now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between your self-worth and your family's approval? Do you think cutting them off was the right move? Or do you believe in second chances, even after everything? Let me know in the comments. I'd really like to hear what you think.